Hello and welcome back to Babes in the News. My name is Abby.
And my name is Cindy.
Today's topic's a very serious one, so just before we start, we'd like to give a couple trigger warnings. We'll be discussing topics regarding war, violence against women, and assault. If any of these are triggering to you, we advise you tune in next time. Our discussion today will be joined by Dalia Haidar, a journalist from the BBC who has been reporting on the war in Gaza and who's been in contact with a family living there now.
So, to get into some background information on our topic today, since the start of Israel's latest offensive on the Gaza Strip, over 30,000 people have been killed, 70% of that number being exclusively women and children. For those who have survived, the disruption to daily life as the conflict continues has led to new challenges, especially for women and girls, which have arose from the lack of proper sanitation and infrastructure due to Israel's bombing of the Gaza Strip. The lack of aid being allowed into Gaza means that women cannot access proper sanitary products, which forces them to use unsafe methods of managing their periods. On top of this discomfort, the destruction of homes and safe areas leaves women and girls extremely vulnerable. Al Jazeera reports that Palestinian women and girls have been subjected to sexual assault by IDF soldiers. The fear of these living conditions causes ongoing trauma and stress. This has been manifesting particularly in the amount of miscarriages which have been reported since the beginning of the war. Hello, I'm here with Dalia Hidar from the BBC, and she'll be explaining to us some of the effects of the war which is happening in Gaza right now for women affected. So, Dalia, would you be able to kind of explain some ways in which women specifically are affected by the conflict?
Yeah, so I mean, of course, everybody's affected by the conflict, but in terms of the effect it has on women, it's quite severe because let alone the loss of lives that we've been witnessing, or like according to the UN, over 9,000 women have been reportedly killed by the Israeli forces in Gaza until early March. But there are also the other problems that the women and other like struggles that the women are going through in terms of having health care, medical care, in terms of pregnancy, delivery to their healthy babies, and also caring for their children with the lack of food and safe places to shelter.
Yeah. So, in terms of ways in which women are trying to combat this and try and make things easier for themselves, is there any ways in which, like, they're trying to adapt almost to in any way they can to these conditions?
Well, the measures they're taking to adapt, they're very limited options for them to be able to adapt. So basically women who cannot, I mean, according again to UN reports and reports from Gaza, women now are having less meals because they try to save the meals for their own children with the lack of food. And we've seen reports about, I think recently there have been 27 deaths reported among children because of the malnutrition and lack of food, and that is having their effects on their mothers because they're trying to provide for their children, so they're skipping meals themselves, which put them at risks because of the malnutrition for the mothers themselves, and also for lactating mothers, for example, they're not able to breastfeed their children, so they are replacing the food for their children with dates wrapped with muslin pieces to feed the newborn when they're after they give birth. Instead of feeding them, there is no clean water to mix with formula milk if they find it, but it's very rare to find this formula milk around. So they are trying to have desperate measures to be able to survive with their children, and these are just few examples.
Right, yeah. What do you think would be some of the effects for these children possibly in the future, like long-term effects of these conditions and the lack of food and the psychological effects? What do you think this will have for the population moving forward?
I mean, moving forward, this will do have a huge impact on the children. You have a whole new generation that is now born and raised in a conflict zone and with lack of food, lack of nutrition, lack of safe places to grow up and play, and also lack of education and all that. In terms of the future effects, I mean, there are the physical effects which we are now witnessing and seeing in terms of like malnutrition and also health consequences. There are also the diseases that are being spread because of the lack of hygiene and the spread of viruses, including hepatitis and other types of viruses. And you also have the trauma by what they've witnessed. There are many children who have lost both their parents and they have lifelong injuries. And there's a new term for those children. It's called wounded children, no surviving families. So these are children that arrived in hospitals with no surviving families and there's no one to care for them. And these are very, very, very difficult circumstances they're going through. And we know that it will have more consequences for the future on their lives.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on from that topic, we're doing a little bit of research and we've seen a report from Al Jazeera saying that there have been reports of IDF soldiers assaulting women, obviously due to like the conditions that are going on, like it's not safe anywhere, it's not safe shelters, like women are protected in any way. Do you know yourself anything about that, and if you're able to speak on that?
I haven't been personally in touch with women that have been directly assaulted, but of course, in conflict zones, safety is one of the things that women struggle to have, and it is insecure environment for women and for children, and for the civilians in general. And I haven't been in touch with women that have been assaulted, but I have seen those reports as well.
Right, yeah. Okay, well, that's all our questions. So, thank you so much for sitting down with us today.
Of course, no worries.
We'd like to thank Dahlia for taking the time out of her day to come on the podcast and help us raise awareness of this issue that we're very passionate about.
The struggle that women in Gaza have been facing has been hard to digest, so if you feel like you want to help or do something to aid the Palestinian people, there are a few charities and resources that you can contact, such as the Al Mustafa Welfare Trust, which is an Islamic charity who have been serving vulnerable and impoverished people for the last 40 years. They have set up a Gaza Crisis Appeal, which you can donate to online, along with UNICEF, who have a Gaza Emergency Fund for the children.
Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.